The podcast you're about to listen to, Focused on Forward, was created on Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First off, it's free. Free is always amazing. Secondly, there's a creation tool that's going to allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone, tablet, or computer. Anchor is going to take that podcast and going to distribute it for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and so many other platforms. And you get to make money from your podcast right away with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one convenient place. So how do you find it and use it? Well, go to your app store, download the free Anchor app, or go to anchor.fm to get started. You too can make a podcast. You can do it with Anchor. Welcome to Focused on Forward. The purpose of this podcast is to focus on recovery from life situations. Be it a disease, chronic or acute, perhaps the loss of someone so dear to you in death, or a change of life patterns that has affected you so profoundly that you have no choice but to find your new normal and become focused on moving forward. Each episode is designed to show the positivity that people bring to each and every one of their stories, the successes they've had, ways that they have become so definitively focused on moving forward. We look forward to sharing their stories, and we hope that they inspire you just as much as they have inspired us. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome to Focused on Forward. Today, we're having the pleasure of talking with Trevor Madrid. He's a firefighter from Mesa, Arizona. And so Trevor has a kind of unique story here of a rare form of cancer that he's had to deal with. But Trevor's going to go into a little more detail about that, but we're not going to just talk about the issue that he has, but like we like to do on Focused on Forward, we want to talk about just that, what Trevor's done to move past it, even though he's still at this moment dealing with it, what he's doing to become focused on forward, and how he's navigating through life in the fun year that is 2020. So Trevor, thank you very much for being on our show, and we're so glad to have you.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome. I appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, this is great. We always look for people who have a good story and a good background story, something that people can attach to. Now, just for a little bit of background, how we got hooked up with Trevor is that I was scrolling through TikTok one day, and I came across a video of this man with an IV on his arm dancing on his hospital bed. And I had to laugh because the very first comment on that video was from a nurse who was freaking out about him being on the bed and dancing. So I started watching more of his content, looking at more of his videos and going, man, this guy's got a great personality and a great sense of humor for the situation he's in. I was like, I have to talk with this guy. So that's why Trevor's here. So Trevor, tell us a little bit about you, how you found out you had cancer, what was going on, all those kind of things. Fill us in on your backstory, if you would.
So, like you said, my name is Trevor Madrid. Born and raised, born in Mesa, raised in Vegas. Came back when I was an adult for Mesa Fire when I was 21 years old. My passion, I love the fire department. Promoted to engineer, tested for captain, waiting on promotion for captain. And, everything was going good. My wife's business was going good. She has a baby shop, Kind Knots, and we were doing amazing with that. And we had a 2-year-old daughter at the time, and we were playing on the couch, and my daughter ends up like kicking me with her heel, just playing around, kicking me with the heel in my abdomen, my left lower abdomen. And it like put me over, like bent me over in pain. I'm like, what the heck happened? I can't believe this happened. And I was complaining about it for like 30 minutes afterwards. I was like, I can't believe she kicked me so hard on my stomach. And my wife was like, come on, Trevor, really? There's no way a 2-year-old could kick you that hard. And no, I was like, I'm serious. I get really, really hurt. I can't believe that she kicked me that hard. So we go back and forth, and she's like, oh, you're just being a wimp. Stop being a wimp. So I'm like, okay, stop being a wimp, whatever. So fast forward like 3 weeks to a month, my wife ended up getting sick, finds out that she's pregnant. That's why she was sick. Gets me sick for 2 days after she found out she was pregnant. I started having these terrible abdominal pains, like where I could barely move my legs out of the vehicle. So I couldn't believe that I couldn't move my legs, and I didn't want to go to the doctor because I'm like, I'm 33 years old. I'm not going to go to the doctor for abdominal pain. She persisted and, wanted me to go to the doctor. She's like, hey, what happens, something seriously wrong with you, or if you have cancer or something and you don't go get this checked out. I was like, come on, there's no possible way. There's nothing wrong with me. So I call one of my friends up to PA, and she was like, hey, it sounds like diverticulitis. You're going to need a CT scan. Just go to the ER. They'll do a CT scan. They'll probably give you antibiotics. You won't be able to eat, nuts or anything like that anymore. I'm like, okay, I can deal with that. I love like pistachios and stuff like that. But so that part will suck. Go to the ER and just, talking to the ER doc, he says, sounds like diverticulitis. Let's do the CT scan, get you antibiotics and be on your way. You're a young firefighter, you're going to be fine. So did the CT scan. Doc comes in my room and he's like, hey, will you come with me to my office? So this is an ER doc. This usually doesn't happen. He's like, hey, will you come look at this computer screen? And I'm like, okay. And he's like, you see that big mass in your left lower abdomen? He's like, you have a 5-inch mass. He's like, so I'm like completely shocked. I'm like, I can't believe I have a 5-inch mass. I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's benign. Maybe. He's like, well, we need to go get this biopsy. So I was like, okay, I'll check myself out. I'll go get my wife, because I went to the ER by myself because I didn't want her sick because she was newly pregnant. And he's like, no, you don't understand. Like, if you leave the hospital and go somewhere else, you're going to lose continuity of care. You just need to take an ambulance to an ER so you could get another ER that has biopsy capabilities, so you could get in and get this taken care of. This could be serious. So he talked me into taking an ambulance ride. My wife comes to the hospital. We go to the next hospital, which is like 30 minutes away, and get biopsied. The next morning, my captain from the fire department comes to the hospital to see, because I called them the night before, like, hey, they found a 5-inch mass in my abdomen. He's like, all right, I'll be there in the morning. He took 6 hours vacation in the morning. So we're sitting there just kind of like talking, making small talk with my captain, my wife, kind of making jokes and stuff. Doctor comes in and he's like, hey, how are you guys doing? He's like, man, you look perfectly healthy. Healthy guy, not overweight, no existing conditions. He's like, but it's probably 1 of 3 cancers. It's either testicular lymphoma or a sarcoma. I'm like taken back. My captain's mouth is wide open. Like, I can't believe I'm hearing this. I look at my wife and I'm like, I'm sorry. And I'm like, doc, is there any way that this could be benign? And he's like, highly unlikely. And he walks out of the room. And I've never dealt with cancer, so I never had that interaction with like somebody telling you bad news. So I'm like, okay, what the hell? Like, you're not even gonna give me hope, doc? Like, I can't believe.
When he first said that, what was the first thing that went through your mind? What was your initial mental reaction to the thought that you might in fact have cancer?
So my wife and I both had that same thought. We looked at each other, and my captain tells this story too all the time. He's like, I looked at my wife Angela, and I was like, I am sorry. I'm sorry for what I know that I'm going to put you through, just because I knew that this was going to be a long drawn out battle and it was going to be hard for her. And she's like, no, I'm sorry. So I just felt bad that I was going to put Angela through all this, because I know that cancer is not easy.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so now the doctor's walked out of the room. He's left you where you felt that there was not a ray of hope. So let's continue from there.
So felt like there's not a ray of hope. I'm still thinking like, man, this could be benign. There's no way that it's going to be one of these 3 type of cancers. And then I start going through my process of elimination, and I'm like, all right, so let's either hope that this is testicular or lymphoma, because they're super easy to beat. There's a lot of people with sarcomas and testicular cancer. Lymphomas and testicular cancer. So there's a lot of research, and I think testicular is one of the number one cancers that firefighters get. So I'm like, let's hope it's from one of those. So I finally get out of the hospital, and one of the other firefighters that had lymphoma, he gives me a call. He's like, hey, I know it's a little bit early, but he's like, I just want to talk to you and give you a couple of warning things. So he is kind of our sounding board initially, because I had no idea about cancer. I know people had different types of cancer, but I didn't realize how many different types of cancer there were.
Sure. You don't know till you know.
Yeah, you don't know till you know. I think you just put that in the back of your mind, like, this is never going to happen to me. So he's like, hey, when you guys go in for your biopsy test results, just know that they're probably not going to have an answer for you for your first appointment. So he warned us going in, right before we went into that appointment. And I was like, okay, still couldn't really wrap my mind around what he was saying, but he warned us at least. So we go to that appointment, and the oncologist was like, hey, the biopsy results isn't back yet. They know it's a sarcoma, but they don't know what type of sarcoma it is. So, this is a week and a half later. So we're like, okay, it's sarcoma, but we don't know exactly what type of cancer it is. So we go meet with a general surgeon, because he's like, hey, just go meet with a surgeon, kind of come up with a treatment plan for surgery, because it's probably going to have to come out. So this is a couple days later. We meet with the surgeon that was at the hospital, at his office. And, we go back there, and we're waiting. He comes in and he's like, hey guys, just want to let you know that this is a really, really rare cancer. You have synovial sarcoma. I'm not going to be able to do anything for you. And we're like, what do you mean you're not going to be able to do anything for us? He's like, I'm a surgeon. And he's like, if this was colon cancer or testicular cancer or anything like that, he's like, I could just cut it out, no problem. I'll be the guy for you. But since this is synovial sarcoma, he's like, you're going to need a very specialized team to take care of this. He's like, most surgeons and oncologists will never see this in your life. And I'm looking at my wife at a blank stare, because we're still spinning at this point with new information.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, I think that would do that for sure.
And we still don't really grasp what synovial sarcoma is, because it was just a word on a paper. I could still kind of see reading the paper, looking at it, not really understanding. Like, man, I've never seen this cancer before. And
right?
You're telling me that a surgeon is saying that he won't be able to operate on it. So the first two doctors weren't capable. The oncologist never called us back. So
wow.
he let the surgeon tell us that we needed to go find a new team. So we're like, okay. So we're thinking team in Arizona. So he's like, hey, I have a friend in MD Anderson in Mesa, I could get you with. He's like, but if it were me, I would go to Mayo or Houston. I would be looking at big sarcoma facilities. And we're still really not wrapping our mind around this. So we start Googling, of course. You get in the car and you start Googling what synovial sarcoma is.
Right. Dr. Google.
So yeah, you start doing that. I'm like, man, this is insane. And we're looking at the mortality rate and all the bad stuff that comes along. I don't know if you Googled synovial sarcoma.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. It's interesting too that you say that, as soon as you started doing Google research. Last year when my daughter was in the hospital, when she was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, we had never heard of it before. Right. So as soon as the doctor tells us and walks out of the room, my wife and I look at each other and we both get our phones out and start Googling it, which, by the way, is probably not a good idea when you're looking up something that's going to be life-altering.
You're right. So start Googling it, trying to figure out what we're doing. Ends up trying to call different cancer facilities, trying to make appointments. Super, super stressful. Driving around the city, trying to talk to other doctors. So in the meantime, my wife starts bleeding down her leg from her pregnancy.
Oh no.
Yeah, so we're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. We're gonna take you to the doctor to see what's going on. I don't know if I just made you stress out to where you're losing the baby.
Oh no.
So we go to one facility, we go to OB facility, and they're like, hey, you have to be 24 weeks pregnant before we see you here at the center. You have to go to the main ER. There was like, my wife says like she saw somebody bleeding in the ER. There's a bunch of sick people. Last place I wanted my wife to be. So I take her back to where I get diagnosed, because that hospital is really slow hospital. It's a smaller hospital. End up taking her back to that facility, and so she gets a ultrasound, and I think it was I can't remember exactly what the hemorrhage was. Corey, I don't know the exact name of it. She had a hemorrhage, like a small tear in her uterus that ended up healing itself, but the baby was doing fine.
Okay, well, that's a close call.
So, so in that meantime, we're sitting there Googling more. I'm like, all right, I have this idea. I was like, all right, firefighters are getting cancer a lot. I knew that they were getting cancer a lot. I didn't know the exact rate that we were getting cancer. So I just started Googling firefighters. I was like, I'm just going to start reaching out to any firefighter that's put themselves out online that is dealing with this type of cancer to see what kind of treatment that they've done. So first firefighter dead within 3 months, second firefighter dead within a year, third firefighter dead. So by the time we hit the fifth firefighter that died within a year, I was like, all right, that plant sucks. I'm not gonna do that anymore.
Right? Wow.
And my wife is like, please stop. Like, this is
Yeah.
already a terrible day. Like,
Right?
we need to
Yeah.
like, because
Wow.
like she was on board with me, like, let's look up somebody that knows what to do, where to go.
Well, it's a
And
smart
then
idea because, you look at somebody who's already gone down that path and, hey, is there something that they're doing that I can emulate?
yeah,
It makes sense. But yeah, that's a kind of a harsh reality when the people you're looking for aren't there anymore.
that was a really, really harsh reality. Um, looking for those firefighters and like not seeing some, and like my captain Googled it. There's everybody that I talked to kind of like just stopped Googling it, because everything that they saw when firefighter gets this type of cancer, it's really not good. The mortality rate's super high. But looking back at it now that I know more, the mortality rate's super high because synovial sarcoma is usually in your joints. Synovial fluid is like what makes your joints lubricated, and that's what my cancer is based on. So usually firefighters work out a lot. They have a hard job where they're lifting patients. You're going into fires, you're training, you're doing all kinds of stuff. So if you're sore, it's really, really not uncommon to be sore to the point where you're like, oh, that kind of hurts. But I felt this before. I know it'll go away. But usually that soreness doesn't go away in joints. So people just keep putting it off, like, oh, I sprained my elbow, I sprained my ankle, and they just kind of like live with it. And then they live with it so long that it metastasizes and it goes to other places. So I'm
Okay.
lucky that mine is localized in the abdomen, even though usually 1 to 3 people out of every million get my type of cancer. It being in the abdomen, the doctors are saying like, hey, my surgeon in New York, Dr. Yoon, is an amazing surgeon. That's all he operates on is gastrointestinal and sarcomas. And he was like, I don't think I've ever seen your type of cancer in the abdomen before. So that's how rare it is.
Holy cow. So a guy who specializes in this has never seen it before.
Right. So,
Wow.
and we were kind of warned early. So the way that we got to Mayo, our old neighbor in Vegas, her best friend married a doctor that's on the board for Mayo. And I don't know how my wife remembered it. We were driving somewhere and she's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I forgot about Daisha's friend. So she ends up calling our old neighbor and it's like, hey, is your friend still in Arizona? Is her husband working at Mayo? And it just happened to be that he's on the board. So we got connected with him and he's like, hey guys, like you need a really specialized team for this type of cancer because it's so rare. He's like, any cancer facility is going to want to treat you because you're a young guy. They could throw everything at you. He's like, the way that I could put it is like, you're the Kobe of cancer. Everybody wants you on their team because they could throw anything at you and you'll be fine. So you got to be very, very careful on the doctors that you choose. So I'm still really not wrapping my mind around it. We just kind of keep that in the back of our head all the time. So went to MD Anderson, their facility. We just didn't get a great feeling from the surgeon. He's like, when the time comes, we'll see when this happens. He was dealing in like we'll sees, and like I wanted to deal in certainties. So
Right.
not
This
saying that
seems
he's not
like
a great surgeon.
right, but this seems like a time for definites, not maybes.
Yeah, exactly. So we're like, all right, maybe, it's not a sarcoma center. We knew that the MD Anderson in Mesa is not a sarcoma center. So we're like, hey, we'll just go to Houston. This is before we got into Mayo, because we're still trying to talk to the doctors in Mayo and try to get in. And at this point, for anybody that's listening right now, know when you're looking for a cancer facility to treat you, it does not happen right away. You think that, I thought it's kind of like General Hospital where you get diagnosed with cancer, doctor comes in and is like, hey, you have this much time to live and we're going to start treatment right now. No, like it takes months for treatment plans to get put in place, even though
Yes.
you want things to move fast.
Right.
And you could definitely help yourself by making those phone calls, making sure they need stuff, and just being on them to always get back to you so you could push appointments. If
Absolutely.
you're out
Yeah.
there and you have to be your own advocate. If you don't feel something's right, you have to change it and you have to like push for what you think is right, because there's going to be really no one else that's going to advocate for you but you. And
Agreed.
luckily I have my wife. When I feel like, no, it's okay, she's like, no, it's really not okay, let's do this and this. So we have sounding boards where we could sound off each other. So I lean heavily on my wife Angela for that, and I'm super, super happy that I have her, because when I'm on chemo and I have chemo brain or chemo fog or whatever anybody wants to call it, I could lean on
Sure.
her for being that sounding board. Like, hey, no, this is the plan that we're going on, and so she'll speak up. And even first, like through these first appointments, trying to get to the cancer facility, I was in awe sometimes, just like, what the hell is going on? And my wife's like, no, she had these bullet points written down, you know, like these are the things that we want to know. So tell us what we want to know out of these things. So finally get to Mayo, figured out that MD Anderson and Mayo and anywhere I'd go would use the same chemo for synovial sarcoma. It's called AIM chemo, where you're hospitalized for 5 days. They give you chemo and you can only get a maximum of 6 rounds of it. So I knew nationwide, anywhere I went, this is the chemo I was going to go. So that's how we chose Mayo here in Scottsdale instead of going, or in Phoenix instead of going to MD Anderson in Houston. So started chemo, knew that I wanted to help other people out, but for some reason, everything was so new. Last year just like blew up in our face. Didn't really post very much on social media, was kind of quiet about it. Just going through treatments. The first treatment, I got home, firefighters were here, they redid my bathroom, put a new toilet in, just because they knew how bad chemo could possibly be.
That's awesome.
So super awesome. The brother and sisterhood's been absolutely amazing. The guys
That's
on my
phenomenal, man.
department are
That's awesome.
amazing.
Love it.
So they came redid my bathroom, new toilet, new floor, new vanity. Amazing. Just because the doctors told us like, hey, you're not going to be able to use the same bathroom as your family because chemo's so toxic. So giving them high fives, giving them hugs, like, thank you guys so much. I didn't take my nausea medicine because this is like when after I get home after 5 days, they're still like finishing my bathroom up. So there's probably like 10 guys here, doing this bathroom. Give them all hugs and like so appreciative. Like that meant so much to me that these guys would come on their days off. There's a couple crews here that were on shift at the time, and it was truly amazing. So I didn't take my nausea medicine for like 6 hours because I felt good, but I was coming out of the hospital where I was getting IV med or nausea medicine. So compazine and Ativan. I didn't. I went to sleep. I woke up and probably threw up like 31 times. I think I counted it 31 times that night because
Holy
I was so
cow.
far behind. I was so far behind on my nausea meds that taking nausea meds orally couldn't catch me up. So you
Holy.
need to be like on a steady base.
Right.
So I had the guys come over, give me an IV. So I ended up having 2 bags of IV fluid from the fire department. And I was just trying to stay home because I didn't want to go to the ER. End up going to the ER because I was still super nauseous, could barely move because I thrown up so much. They give me IV medication, IV compazine, and finally I didn't feel nauseous anymore. So it was like a terrible first day out of the hospital. So with cancer or with chemo, like it drops your immune system really low, and usually it goes the lowest like 2 or 3 days after you finish treatment. So having the guys over, those were the only people that I had over at the time. Nobody else came over. I ended up getting coronavirus. It was like the common cold coronavirus. It wasn't COVID-19. And
Okay.
ended up getting sick, getting a fever. They're like, anytime you get a fever over 100.4, you need to go to the ER. And I'm like, holy crap. Okay. So didn't want to go. My wife's like, no, you're going. Not a choice. Test me, ended up getting coronavirus before COVID-19 was even out because this was last year. And I was in the ICU for 5 days just from the common cold. And the docs were
Holy.
like, hey, were you out in public? What were you doing? Were you going out to eat? What, were your kids playing somewhere? Kind of trying to figure out where I got sick from.
All right. Do a little
I was
contact
like,
tracing.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, all the guys were at the house doing my bathroom, and I was giving everybody hugs, because I'm so appreciative. So they're like, no, like if anybody's sick at all, your immune system is nothing. So you can't do that. So within the first week, I threw up 31 times and I got put back in the ICU for 5 days. So that kind of started my social distancing last April, April 2019. So we've had practice on social distancing because I made that mistake for a long time.
Right.
So I did 4 treatments of chemo, and then went to New York, got surgery, did 2 more, and after the surgery, did 2 more treatments or rounds of chemo. And the pathology came back and they said, hey, you have cells that were left over. Your tumor wasn't all the way dead from chemo. And so you have cells left over, you need radiation. So they did 31 treatments of radiation. And honestly, my radiation oncologist who got me to New York, because she's like, you need a specialty surgeon to take care of your cancer, take it out. So Dr. Shukla has been absolutely amazing in this process. So she did 31 treatments of radiation, and I felt great. I was getting healthy again. Went back to worked for a few months, and then May, I went back in for my first scan, my initial scan after treatment, and they're like, hey, Trevor, you have another tumor that's 5 centimeters in between your bladder and your tailbone. So this is my second tumor that I'm on now. So they're like, hey, we're going to be really aggressive with this. We're going to do really high dose ifosfamide. It's a type of chemo. And you're going to be hospitalized for 7 nights, 8 days. And we're going to give you chemo straight through, 20 hours a day of those days.
Oh, wow.
So super, super long chemo. And at this point, I'm like, I want to give back and let other people know, like, hey, what I'm battling, and let them know that as long as you stay positive, you could get through this. And it just happened to be that TikTok was the app that I was using. So just kind of dancing, having fun. And it really, really, there's been a lot of people that have reached out and like, hey, you've made my day. Like when I'm having a bad day, I look at this and, you've really changed my perspective on how I'm looking at things. So, I just started doing TikTok more and more. And there's a ton of firefighters that reach out, and just the awareness of firefighter cancer, I'm trying to put that out there, because a lot of people don't realize you're more likely to die from cancer as a firefighter than you are from a burning building, a car accident, heart
Oh,
disease, or
really?
anything. Yeah. So all those combined, you're more likely to die from cancer.
Okay. Well, yeah, I would not have known that. So that,
Yeah. So I'm trying to put that out there so the public actually knows, like, hey, this is a serious issue. And, the guys out that I work with, guys and girls that I work with, like, hey, this is really, really serious. You need to make sure you take the precautions to keep yourself safe for your family. So
okay.
it brings it to light for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. So where are we at right now in the stream of things for your health? Now we know that you dealt with the one tumor. Now
Mm-hmm.
you're dealing with the second tumor. So where are we at right now in the level of treatment?
So right now, last week is and the week before, the last 2 weeks have probably been like the most hectic weeks ever, trying to figure out what the next course of treatment is. So the whole plan from before was to do 4 rounds of chemo, go get surgery, come back and do another 6 rounds of chemo afterwards. And so that was the plan. The surgeon was good with it. Everybody was good with it. So 2 Fridays ago, I get called and they're like, hey, Trevor, I don't think the surgeon called me himself. And he's like, I don't feel safe doing the surgery. You're going to need radiation. So I'm like, oh man, that sucks. Okay. Surgery's canceled. We already had plane tickets booked. We're found a place to stay, getting ready for travel. So that just blows up in your face. And he's like, I'm letting you know right now that you're going to need an colonoscopy bag. And he told me, like, hey, we're not going to be doing surgery. We want to have positive margins, and positive margins are clear cells with no cancer in them. And he's like, I don't believe that I could get positive margins without doing radiation. So he's like, I'm also going to take some of your colon. So you're going to need an colonoscopy bag. You're going to need a bag to let your colon heal. So I'm like, oh, you're not just taking this tumor out, you're taking out colon with it. So the surgery is going to be way longer process. And it's not going to be one
Extensive.
surgery. It's
Yeah.
going to be 2 surgeries.
Yeah, that's pretty
And
extensive surgery too. So the
yeah,
colonoscopy.
yeah. So we're going to be traveling to New York twice. So like, holy crap, this is going to be way more expensive than we thought. This sucks. I'm going to have a bag. Like, you're just going through all these things that are running through your mind. So finally I got okay with it. All right, let's do this. Let's do radiation, and we'll get surgery. So then I get called and they're like, my oncologist was like, hey, chemo will probably be the best course of treatment with radiation, because it enhances the chemo, enhances the radiation. So it's a sensitizer. So if you're getting radiation and chemo at the same time, it makes the radiation stronger in that area. So I'm like, okay, so I'm getting chemo on top of getting 25 treatments of radiation, and then we'll go to surgery. So
Wow.
this is the third time that has changed within a few days of each other.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, they're being aggressive. I could wrap my mind around that. So the following Friday, I get a call back from the surgeon. He's like, hey, we took this to tumor conference, and I'm a little bit concerned with the other lesions that we're seeing on your colon. I'm like, what other lesions? I've been dealing with this since May, and nobody's ever talked about other lesions. He's like, yeah, we're seeing another lesion on your colon, and we're seeing one in your lung. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, what is going on? And he's like, well, I think that you should probably look at a clinical trial. So he's like, I'll call your doctors right now, and then I'll let them talk to you. So I'm like, okay, we'll look at a clinical trial. So it changed again. So we took blood work, and it took a week and a half for it to come, or 13 days for it to come back. 10 days for it to come back. And we're like, what the hell? Do I have the right markers for this clinical trial? Ends up that I don't have the markers for the clinical trial. Now we're back to doing chemo and radiation. So it changed again. So
You just kind of get bouncing all over the place then.
just bouncing all over the place. Nobody really knows what's going on with my course of treatment. And then that's totally not our personalities. Like, we're a family like where we make a list. We're going to hit these things on the list, check them off.
Right. We're scheduled. We're gonna, we're organized. We're scheduled. We're gonna do it this, and this.
Yeah. And cancer has not been that way. It's kind of taught us that we can't control everything, every aspect of our lives.
Very true.
Yeah. So now we're back to chemo, radiation, and then surgery 5 weeks after that. So we're looking at surgery sometime early December. So I start chemo, radiation next Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all right. So that kind of gives us a snapshot of where you're at and what's going on. So let me ask you this. You have all this reason as to why, if somebody wanted to be a little down in the mouth, so to speak, they could be.
Right.
So what keeps you going? What keeps you being the positive person that I have found you to be in our conversations and what I see on TikTok? And I can tell you from what I see on it's not an act. That seems to be exactly who you are and what you are. So what keeps you positive?
So what keeps me positive is my wife, Angela, and my two little kids, my daughter, Mila, and my son, Maverick. Daughter's 3, and my he'll turn a year October 20th. So just to know that I come home and they absolutely love me, and my wife absolutely loves me and needs me, knowing that I have somebody to fight for, it makes it really, really easy to stay positive. Because I don't ever want my daughter, since she could actually see me sad, see me down. My wife's kind of made it a point to where I can never really lay in bed. She's like, you could come be a dad and lay on the couch, but you can't just hoard yourself in the room. So,
like that.
And another thing that my wife and I made a pact on, is we can never have 2 bad days in a row. So it's okay to have a bad day.
Absolutely.
It's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be mad at God if you want to, be mad at whoever you want to be mad at or sad about. That's fine. But not to have 2 days in a row like that. So,
right. 2 days easily becomes 3 days. 3 days easily becomes 4 days.
Exactly. So we can have a bad day, and we always make sure it's not 2 in a row. Whether we do a home project or, if I'm having a bad day, I'm like, hey, I just need to get on the Peloton. I need to work out, because that's been my go-to. Is if I'm feeling bad, I'll do a workout and get aggression or whatever emotion that I don't know how to deal with. I'll work out, and it'll help me with that anxiety and not feeling like I'm having a good day.
Okay.
So being positive for my family is definitely a thing. And then also making these TikTok videos, as much as it's helped other people, it's helped me, because it gives me an outlet, something to be positive about, having a community. And that's been like a really, really good thing with at this time, is having a really strong community. And TikTok, it's amazing how positive and strong that community is for me.
Agreed. Yeah, there's a lot of positivity. Different content creators are spreading that thought of positivity and being positive, and so it can be a very positive place, and it can be a very encouraging place, especially when you have people who are doing the things like you're doing, and so kudos to you for being a member of the positivity group that needs to be showing that what needs to be done and how to do it. So that's really cool. Let me ask you this as well, and this is a question I like to ask all my guests. So if you listen to any of the other episodes, you may already know what I'm about to ask. So looking back over your entirety of your experience, and not to minimize it down to one sentence, but if we were to minimize it down to one sentence, what's the one shining star of that you've learned over the last 2 years? What's that shining star, that beacon that you go, this is what I've learned over the last few years?
The beacon that I've learned is that I could tell anybody is not to have 2 bad days in a row. Like, we've already hit on it, but it's okay to have a bad day, but it's not okay to have 2 to 10 bad days in a row, because it really like manifests itself when you start having bad days and thinking things are going bad. You have to find the positive light in everything that you're doing when you're in a bad situation, because it's just not healthy to dwell on the bad stuff that you cannot control. So
I like that. That's good. Yeah. When when my boys were younger, and I also said this to my daughter as well. She's 13. My oldest son is, well, he's almost 22 now, but and then my middle son is 18. But when they were younger and they would fall down and hurt themselves, we're big hockey fans in
right.
our house, and so we'd always tell the boys and my daughter, suck it up. You're a hockey player. And the reason for that is that, if you ever watched hockey or you pay attention to hockey, if they're hurt or if they're not feeling the greatest, they suck it up and they just keep going. They do what they need to do,
Yep.
and they power through and just get it done. It doesn't mean that they're happy about it. It doesn't mean that they're enjoying it, but it does mean that they're
Right.
able to power through and kind of, push ahead. And so, last year while my daughter was going through therapies and treatments, I'd look at her and go, hey, suck it up. You're a hockey player. And she
Yeah.
quickly reminded me that she wasn't, but that's not the point. All right. So cool. So, and then also too, just in almost in a little bit of a conclusion here, what one piece of advice would you give to somebody who's dealing with any type of cancer? What's the single greatest thing that you've discovered along your journey that you would want to make sure that somebody heard and understood?
The greatest thing that I think somebody should know is know that the doctors are practicing medicine. So if you have a gut feeling that your treatment is not going the way that you want it to go, you have ultimate control, and you could get a second, a third, a fourth opinion until you find the treatment plan that fits you perfectly and that you feel comfortable with. You don't have to, just because they're a doctor and they might be smarter than you, because there's doctors that are way smarter than me. If I disagree and don't feel comfortable with their treatment plan, I am not going to put myself and my family through that. So get multiple opinions so you can make an informed decision for yourself.
Very good. Yeah, absolutely. Knowledge is power, and anything you're doing in life, knowledge is power. So that's good. Okay. So Trevor, let everybody know what your TikTok name is so that when people go to TikTok, they can look you up. Because honestly, guys, if you aren't already following Trevor on TikTok, you need to. And I mean that wholeheartedly. I really do. He has great content. And if if you watch one of his videos and you're not smiling afterwards, then watch a second or third one. You will be soon enough. So what's your TikTok name?
My TikTok name is kinda_knots. It's my wife's business name. Like I told her about TikTok a long time ago when it was Musically, that, hey, this is gonna be the next big app. And she's like, there's no way that's gonna be the next big app. It's just a bunch of kids singing on it. And I'm like, I'm telling you, this is gonna be the next big app. Yeah, go give us a follow. I hope that I'm able to brighten your day every once in a while and do some fun dances. Going through radiation, I want to give people an idea of like what radiation actually looks like from a patient's point of view, instead of like a brochure, because everything you look up for radiation, it's all a brochure approach.
Well, that's
So
all been
my doctor's
Photoshop and
letting me,
glossed. So
yeah, my doctor's letting me film all my radiation treatments. So I'm going to post all those on TikTok so people could actually see what day-to-day radiation looks like.
oh, cool. All right. So yeah, we'll look out for those too. So Trevor, hey, thank you so much for being on today. We've really enjoyed your story, your positivity as well, and we wish you all the best with this, sir.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. So go look up Trevor Madrid on TikTok. Follow his stuff. Give him a like on his videos. A like and a follow. That's how we do it over there. Send him some positivity, some nice comments, because as much positivity as he's sharing out, he's going to need back as well as he pushes through this. So this is a nice way to be able to support somebody else on their journey through life. So I think that's going to do it today for us here on Focused on Forward. Well, that concludes another episode of Focused on Forward. To be a guest of Focused on Forward, you can reach us through Twitter at podcastfof, through our Facebook page named Focused on Forward, or through email focusedonforward@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing each and every one of your stories that has yet to be told. So until then, be safe, be kind, and be loving to one another as you stay focused on forward.